Dr. Beena Philip, Honorable Mayor of this great but very inclusive city, very beautiful city, Father John Mannarathara, Director of uh, this center, uh, Mr. Madhu Narayanan, who spoke so passionately about this book, Shauna Rodrigues. I pick up from some of her comments at the end, and Sunitha Nair and Simi S. Nair. I have written this book. It took me a long time, as Shauna was pointing out. So I let the book to speak. So I don't think I can offer any kind of serious reflections on the book. I want to start by thanking Sudhir, my friend, for inviting us, for hosting us for the last 2 days. He is a person of great talents, extremely well read. And it was, when he invited me, I couldn't say no. Let me say a few words about the book itself. John Donne, a great historian of our times, in a book called Western Political Theory in the Face of the Future, there is a chapter on democracy. And in this chapter, he says, these days, all of us are Democrats, from extreme dictators to people who want to deny democracy to everyone. All of them call themselves as Democrats. Ambedkar has also been normalized in India. From everyone, from extreme non-Ambedkarite position to Ambedkarite, they all call themselves Ambedkar or Ambedkar's followers. And there is something interesting about it, because I think Ambedkar, whether you like it or not, has become the norm. Norm might be denied, but he has become increasingly the norm around which I think we want to imagine our public life. I have written on Ambedkar quite early on. I published my first essay on Babasaheb Ambedkar's Buddhism in 1991. And subsequently, I did a couple of works on Ambedkar. Ambedkar always fascinated me, but I left working on Ambedkar in the serious sense in which I was working. But recently, there have been a spate of books on Babasaheb Ambedkar. And some of them are great works. Some of them are good reads, like Shashi Tharoor's book on Ambedkar. It's a great read, but it is just, a couple of themes picked up for consideration. There is the work of Ashok Gopal, which I think is one of the great intellectual histories of Babasaheb Ambedkar. This book, I conceived this book not as an intellectual history. I'm not interested so much there. Not that it is not important, but I don't have the capacity to work in that area. Neither did I want to go into the sociology of Indian society, which is important, but not in this book. I just wanted to see what is the kind of frame that someone like Ambedkar employs to think about our public life. and whether that frame makes sense to a large number of people across the world. And that's why the second title, A Grammar of Public Life from Social Margins. And reading across writings that have come from deeply oppressed people in the world today, I felt that much of Ambedkar would make sense to people, to large number of people across the world. And as Shauna was pointing out, I thought that why not construct a thinker in India who is deeply speaking to the context in India, but at the same time speaking to the predicament of large number of people in the world. And I thought that I would like to cast the book in that particular fashion. This is one thing I want to say. The second thing I want to highlight, and highlight means I thought when I wrote, I was, there are a lot of books that have come on Ambedkar's constitutionalism. There are works that have been published on Ambedkar's approach to the national movement, particularly commenting on partition of India. There have been books on annihilation of caste, because caste has become increasingly a major theme of study, not merely in India, but across the world. I was much more interested about the integral argument that infuses Ambedkar's works and political practices, public practices. And I'm constructing an argument across the book. And let me briefly state what is that argument. And when he builds up that argument, before I posit the argument, when Ambedkar builds that argument, he connects himself to a worldwide tradition of learning. He connects himself to certain significant aspects of liberal thinking. He connects himself to certain key books of Marxism. He connects himself to the nationalist thought in India a very big way. So what is that argument? Ambedkar argues that Ambedkar starts his journey by positing before us or constructing before us an idea of the human. And humans, he argues, are people endowed with a unique dignity, and all of us owe a respect to this unique identity of human beings. And in this uniqueness consists not merely in the capacity of reasoning, etc., but also in terms of attuning to the world, begin to feel across the world. Not merely feel our surroundings, but being attuned to the world. And I have used the concept of sociality to underscore it. And it is on grounds of sociality that we can develop ourselves fully. And Ambedkar calls it, quote unquote, self-perfection. If the idea of the human should be central to public life, and it is quite different from the way Ambedkar constructs the idea of the human, is quite different from the way humanism in the West constructed the idea of the human in the 15th and 16th centuries. If that is the case, he finds caste and untouchability as grounds to be opposed, as social relations to be opposed. And Ambedkar opposes it by employing all the resources in his command. Ambedkar begins to argue that when you are fighting for freedom, you cannot deny freedom to a large number of people. There is something integral about freedom. You cannot deny freedom to others and begin to say, we want to have freedom against the British. I feel that there is something which is central in this argument. If public life has to be grounded in the notion of the human, and all obstacles and barricades around our becoming human have to be opposed, Ambedkar says, the idea of justice is central. And justice demands that humans be treated as equal. And humans can be treated as equal not by denying freedoms, but by actually reposing freedom on grounds of equality, and therefore proposes a series of concepts, a distinct body of concepts to defend justice. And he thinks that only under democracy, this particular kind of a vision of the fully developed human beings can be realized. Ambedkar thinks that religion is important. Religion is something very public because it is the cement which keeps us together, which enables democracy to work. But often religions do not play that role. They begin to deny human beings their sociality, their urge towards self-perfection. And therefore, it is important either to rediscover religion afresh or make religions to bend in such a way that they begin to recognize the human and his or her search towards self-perfection. This is a big interconnected argument. Ambedkar engages with the entire world, scholarship of the entire world, from the 19th century, from the mid of the 19th century till he was writing, almost a century of great literature that came to be produced. There is none like him as far as India was concerned, 20th century India was concerned, in terms of scholarship. But what happens in most of his books, the statements that he made are not very clear because of the editor's fault. And sometimes Ambedkar would actually begin to quote from his memory. And when probably the typist took down the notes, spellings were mistaken. So what I do across the book is go back to the original statements, go back to the original text and say, where are these arguments coming from, or what is the locale of the arguments? So there is a little of that archaeology you will find in that book. And I close by pointing out a small legacy which I tried to pose in the introduction to the book. Ambedkar calls Kabir, the Buddha, Kabir, and Jyotirao Phule as his gurus. I have tried to tease out this great symbol called Guru in the text. And what does he receive from Kabir? You don't find Ambedkar quoting extensively from Kabir, but he calls Kabir as his Guru. and his family tradition was strongly Kabirpanthi. He was part of the Jyoti Rao Phule tradition, but became eventually quite critical of Phule as well. Buddha lives with him all the time. He doesn't call John Dewey as his guru. He calls John Dewey as his teacher, a teacher who is present throughout his writings till the Buddha and his Dhamma in 1956. A lot of people today, particularly some important scholars, have tried to reduce Ambedkar's thinking to the work of John Dewey. While there is a great deal of influence of John Dewey in Ambedkar's writings, I argue in this book that Ambedkar is his own person, his own intellectual. There is the presence of the teachers, as I have the presence of my teachers in my life. I might often go back to the books of my teachers, but I want to plow my own field. I want to plow my own way. And Ambedkar does that. So there are elements of pragmatism in Ambedkar, but Ambedkar was also, as Shauna was pointing out, was somebody who was trying to craft a very distinct kind of moral universe. This is the large scope for the book that I have covered, but all of you know who are writing books that books have their own journeys. Today the market would determine what is going to be the journey of the book. I am not much worried about it, but I think it is important for us to go back to Ambedkar to see whether a different kind of India is possible and a different kind of the world is possible. And there is enough in Ambedkar to suggest that there is a different India possible and a different world is possible. And that was the dream I dreamt when I was writing the book. And thank you for coming and speaking on the book. I was fascinated by what Madhu Narayanan was saying, not that I followed what he said, but I was just looking at the intensity with which he was saying things. And thank you very much, Dr. Bina Philip, for those very, very fascinating comments that you offered in your reflection on this occasion.